Hey everyone, Matt Brunig here with my first video. I guess I have a few others. If you look on the YouTube channel, I've got one of me on Thanksgiving and one of me reviewing the Amazon Basics basketball. But this is the first of a different type of video, a serious video, a video in the vein of internet talking head style YouTube videos. I'm going to be trying to do more of these, so let me know what you think. Tips, tricks, hardware, software, interested in any kind of advice you might have. For the time being, I'm going to mostly focus on, putting my talking head in the corner of a screen and running you through some stuff that I've written, or maybe stuff other people have written, or watching some videos, reacting, who knows. But for the first video, I wanted to start off with my favorite subject of all, which is the subject of universal welfare benefits. So I had a piece here, you see here on November 11th at People's Policy Project titled Universal Benefits Cost Less Than Means Tested Benefits. Subtitled here, The Biggest Welfare State Controversy is Driven by Accounting Games. Now, the title is a little bit provocative, obviously. If you follow this debate at all, you will be familiar with the basic contours of it, which are that universal benefits cost more than means tested benefits, but they're supposed to be more politically advantageous, and then people have this fight over and over again. What I want to do with this piece, and what I've been trying to do for years, is to just to flip that entirely on its head and explain to you, no, it's actually the opposite. The universal benefits cost less, and I don't mean in some kind of cutesy way, but I mean in a sense of, like, if you know how to do actual accounting and peer through the kind of bullshit people use in these arguments, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I pegged this piece to a 1998 paper published by Walter Korpi and Joachim Palme. I don't know. I don't. Yeah, he's Swedish. In fact, he's the son of Olof Palme, which you will know as the former prime minister of Sweden, the last great socialist prime minister of Sweden. Great guy, assassinated. Sad situation. I actually seen his son, who wrote the paper, was interviewed about that a while ago, and seemed kind of unfortunate. Here's his dad with Fidel. What a fun time that was. Anyways, in 1998, these two published a paper titled The Paradox of Redistribution and Strategies of Equality, Welfare State Institutions, Inequality and Poverty in the Western Countries. Quite a mouthful. Here you can see it on Sci-Hub. I don't know if I'm supposed to be advertising that I use this possibly illegal service. I don't know that it's illegal. I don't actually know. But anyways, in their paper, they try to tackle this argument that I mentioned at the top, which is that welfare programs, that if you target welfare programs to people with low market incomes, that reduces inequality more than if you don't target them in that way, right? So that's the basic idea. Is like, let's say we have a pot of money, and we could either give it out to everyone as benefits to everyone, like we do with public schools, or we could concentrate that pot of money on the very poor. And it seems like if you concentrate the money on the very poor, then that's going to get you more bang for your buck, right? Because you're not wasting it on people who don't need it, right? That's the sort of idea that they're trying to fight. They want to say, no, you're wrong about that argument. But how do they go about arguing that is an incorrect claim? And the way that they do that is by accepting, this is their fatal error, accepting the basic math of that claim, right? That, yeah, it's more efficient to target the money, just do the math. But then arguing that claim fails to consider the political effects such targeting has on support for increasing the size of the welfare budget. So you can kind of run this in a clean kind of three-pronged argument here, right? If, number one, big non-targeted welfare states reduce inequality and poverty more than small targeted welfare states, and number two, targeting causes welfare states to be small, then 3, targeting is actually worse for inequality and poverty than not targeting. And they go on to do a bunch of cross-country regressions to try to show that this seems to be true. And it's a kind of bank shot move here to say that, yeah, on paper it looks like if you target the money, it's better. But the second order effect of targeting is political support for the welfare state gets to be so low that you can't build out a robust welfare state. And you'd rather have a big, robust welfare state than a small, targeted one, and off you go, right? That's the move that they go into. Now, this paper, this has basically set the agenda on the left for arguments for universal benefits for 20 years now. And there have been dozens and dozens of papers arguing it's true and false. And it's just kind of become a staple argument for all social democrats, all people who support universal programs. And that's fine. I think the intuition underlying the paper, which is that we want to build solidarity in the welfare state, and that does require not being super targeted. I think that is a reasonable political judgment. Now, whether you can prove that through cross-country regressions, and that I'm a little bit less certain of, but I think it makes intuitive sense. However, I think they make a mistake when they accept the idea that targeted benefits are actually more efficient. When they accept the idea that, yeah, if you had a set pot of money, that it would be better to target it to the poor, and that's actually gets you more bang to the buck. I think that that is wrong, provably wrong, and that they have bought into accounting mistakes, accounting gimmicks that I can very clearly show are just accounting gimmicks. Okay, so I do this in this piece by using this kind of Socratic dialogue, if you will, between two individuals who are set down, two policy wonks. You set them down at a table. One of them is a universalist. They want universal programs. The other one is a means tester. And you set them down at a table and you say, I got a competition for you guys. I want you guys to design a tax policy that raises $100 billion of revenue, and then design a cash welfare program for kids that costs exactly $100 billion. You can't tax more. You can't spend more. Well, whoever comes up with the best combo that reduces poverty and inequality the most wins the competition, right? So that's the little game that we've set up to illustrate this point. And I talk about cash welfare programs for kids here only because that's a major topic right now in the U.S., obviously, for the last couple of years. So, but it could be anything else. It could be old age pensions. It could be disability benefits. It doesn't really matter what example you use, but that's the one I'm choosing. Okay, so they get this challenge, and the very first thing they do is they work on their tax policy. Now, on the tax side of things, if you're trying to reduce poverty and inequality the most just on the tax side, then what you're going to do is just figure out who can I get $100 billion from, like starting from the richest person in society and like walk my way down. What's the most optimal way to get $100 billion that way? And you design your tax policy that way. In this piece, I assume that they end up scribbling their tax policies on a piece of paper, flip them over, and then they lo and behold, they came up with the same thing. All right, great. So that means we've got the second part of the challenge, which remember is a cash welfare program that costs $100 billion, right? So the universalist, when they decide that they're going to do their cash benefit program, they take the $100 billion, they divide it by the number of kids in society, and they pay out an equal amount to each kid. Right? That's how universalists operate. That's how they like to design stuff. So when he does this, he does some math, and he says, look, I can pay out $3,000 per kid with $100 billion. This is a hypothetical society, right? So then the means tester comes back, and he loves to means test, of course, right? So instead of giving $3,000 to each kid, he decides to provide $6,000 per kid, except that kids living in families earning more than $50,000 per year will receive 5 cents less than the $6,000 benefit for every dollar they earn beyond $50,000. So for those more familiar with the vernacular here, it's a $6,000 benefit, but there's a 5% phase out starting at $50,000 of income. Okay, so they flip their cards over and they show their welfare policy to the other. The means tester, as I said here, he starts to smile, starts to smirk, and he goes, my welfare policy provides twice as much benefit to the poor as yours does. Remember, the universalists only provided $3,000 per kid, which also means $3,000 per poor kid, whereas the means tester provides $6,000 per kid with the phase out, which means that the poor kids get $6,000, so they get twice as much. And since they had the same tax policy, the means tester wins. Same tax policy. Means tester has $6,000 per poor kid. The universalist only has $3,000 per poor kid. The means tester seems to win, right? Just as we supposed. If you start with a fixed bucket of money and you target it to the poor, you can spend more on the poor than if you spend it out universally. That's what, right? That's targeting efficiency. It's hard to deny that math, right? Except in this example, after seeing the means tester's policy, the universalist begins to revise his policies. It's in the rules. You're allowed to change your policies before you turn them in. Okay, so he adds a second line to his tax policy that says 5% surcharge tax on earnings beyond $50,000 for tax units with children, up to $6,000 of tax per child. And then he changes his welfare policy so that they pay out $3,000 per kid, or rather, so that the $3,000 per kid benefit is increased to $6,000 per kid. So every year, each kid gets $6,000 in cash, right, instead of $3,000 in cash. And then how does he pay for it? He pays for it with this 5% surcharge tax, right? And then they have this is the Socratic dialogue, right? So I'll just read the Socratic dialogue for you. The means tester says, wait a minute. The rules clearly state that taxes and spending cannot exceed $100 billion. Under your revised plan, you are raising $200 billion of tax revenue, because remember, he had $100 billion on the rich, and then he's raising another $100 billion from this 5% surcharge tax on earning beyond $50,000, right? So now it's $200 billion. You're raising $200 billion of revenue and spending $200 billion on your $6,000 universal child benefit. That's a disqualification. You're only allowed to do $100 billion, right? The universalist comes back. Wait a minute. In your spending program, parents that earn beyond $50,000 of income lose 5 cents of benefit for every dollar they earn beyond $50,000. That phase out is the exact same thing as my tax. Either both violate the rules that taxing and spending cannot exceed $100 billion, or neither do, right? So if we phase out, right, if we phase out at 5 cents of benefit for every dollar beyond $50,000, that's the same thing as a 5% surcharge tax on earnings beyond $50,000 for tax units with children, up to $6,000 of tax. It's the same thing, right? So the universe is like, we're doing the same thing. I'm doing it like as a tax and you're doing it as a phase out, but it's the same thing. So they should be counted the same way. And the means tester says, no, a phase out is not a tax. It's a spending reduction. I tax and spend $100 billion to provide a means tested $6,000 benefit. You tax and spent $200 billion to provide a universal $6,000 benefit. The universalist comes back. No, we both taxed and spent $200 billion to provide a universal $6,000 benefit. It's just that your 5% tax is applied at the point of benefit dispersal, while my 5% tax is applied at the point of paycheck dispersal. Other than the administrative difference, our policies are exactly the same. In fact, now that I think about it, applying a tax on earnings at the point of paycheck dispersal is administratively easier than applying a tax on earnings at the point of benefit dispersal. This means my policy requires less spending on bureaucracy than yours does. I am amending my welfare policy. My lower administrative costs allow me to increase my benefit to $6,200 per kid. I now provide $200 more to poor kids than you do, and am the winner of the challenge, right? So what he's saying here is, look, a 5% phase out versus a 5% marginal tax, it's all the same, but it differs in that for yours, you have to figure out their income, and then when you're sending out the cash benefit, you have to like deduct it from that benefit. For me, my tax, the way I play it, we just deduct it from the paycheck, right? So you can deduct it from the benefit or you can deduct it from the paycheck. If you deduct it from the benefit, it's called a phase out. If you deduct it from the paycheck, it's called a tax. But it amounts to the same thing, except in one important respect, which is that deducting money from paychecks that are based on the size of the paycheck is easier than deducting money from benefits that are based on the size of your paychecks, right? Because there's an extra step involved when you're deducting it from the benefit instead of deducting it from the paycheck. And so that extra step increases bureaucracy, increases administrative costs, increases administrative burdens, which we'll get to in a minute. And so that actually costs more. You have to actually hire a bunch more bureaucrats to run that system. I don't. So the money I save by not hiring those guys, I just put that in the benefit. And so I can do $6,200 now per kid instead of $6,000. This is the crucial sense in which we say universal benefits cost less. Right? Anyways, in this example, I say, the means tester in university, they keep arguing. They can't quite figure this out. The means tester continues to insist, okay, yeah, all your math checks out, but I still think that you violated the rule that taxes and spending cannot exceed $100 billion. So the means tester no longer argues that his policy is optimal in any welfare maximization sense of the word, but instead argues that it satisfies the semantical requirements of the challenge, right? He's now just basically arguing about definitions, right? He wants to really push on the idea that a 5% phase out is a spending reduction, while a 5% tax is a tax, even though they're distributively identical, and to the extent that they differ administratively, clearly the tax is better than the phase out. He wants to push this in my example. And eventually, in the piece, I say they decide that the only way to settle it is to determine how the national accounts would categorize the sums of money in the policy packages. And after looking at those accounts, the means they determine that under the existing national accounting rules, the means tester's phase out is counted as reducing spending, while the universalist's distributively identical and administratively superior tax is accounted as increasing taxes. The universalist, therefore, is disqualified. The means testers declared the winner on this definitional technicality. So, what you should see from the story here is that Corpy and Palme's mistake when they try to make this bank shot argument was they failed to realize that targeting benefits is just taxing by another name. So means testers have not figured out how to better spend a fixed amount of tax revenue. Rather, when we have these debates, what they do is they use national accounting rules to allow themselves to tax more in order to spend more while preventing universalists from doing the same thing. Simply put, the whole idea of targeting efficiency and the simple math underlying it is just an accounting game, right? And I don't know how else to get this across. I've been trying to do it for years and years. I think I've convinced a lot of people of this, but it's still the case that in the discourse writ large, I would say the majority of the people who work in D.C. on policy still do not understand this or pretend to not get it. And so I'm fighting an endless kind of rearguard battle where people use these effective taxes called phase-outs, and instead of counting them as taxes, they count them as spending reductions. And then they go, my program's better than yours because it uses less taxes and less spending. And it's like, no, it's the same taxes, the same spending. It's just that your tax is being applied at the point of benefit dispersal, and mine is being applied at the point of paycheck dispersal, and my way of doing it's better. There's no cost difference. It's an administrative difference. And the universalist approach to administration is better. Not only because it's easier to deduct money from paychecks than it is to deduct money from benefit checks based on paychecks, right, requiring another step, but also because the burdens caused by having to report your income in order to figure out how much benefit you get, right, the burden of that additional step is great enough that a lot of people, especially poor people, especially people with informal streams of income, unstable form of incomes, they struggle to report their income. They struggle to successfully, demonstrate what their income is in order to get the benefits. And so you end up cutting off, in many cases, 30+% of eligible people who should get the benefit, especially really poor people who should get the benefit, but they can't manage to figure out how to fill out all the forms and prove their income. And I know some people aren't that sympathetic to that. They say, oh, that should be easy. One, that's a bad attitude to have. We're not trying to create a government that only works for people. We want to make shit as easy as possible, right? If it's hard for someone to do it, and we can make it to where it's not hard for them to do it, then we should. But also, number two, it's not always easy to report your income. It really isn't. You might have income from lots of different streams. You might have informal income. It might be self-employment income where you have like an unincorporated business where you're like mowing lawns or doing personal services and it's not well accounted. Like they really struggle. If you've ever seen how they attempt to apply income tests to various programs, whether it's Medicaid or food stamps or whatever, if you ever gone to the nitty-gritty of that, it's fucking hellacious. Right? Because there's so many different situations that arise that are just genuinely difficult to figure out. What exactly is this person's income right now? What if someone has, like I said, unstable income? They earned all their income in like 4 months of the year. I know some people like that. They work seasonally. Then what do you do when they're in the off season? Well, do we average out their 4 months of income across the 12 months of income? Do we do it? It's a mess. It's a fucking mess. And if you do it universally, you don't have this problem. If you allow taxes to do the taxing, instead of try to bury a tax in every benefit program through phase outs, if you just use the tax system for that, everything is cleaner, everything is cheaper, less bureaucracy, easier for everyone. And it's just simply not true that, oh yeah, but you're wasting money on you're not, because you're getting it back on the tax side. And the quicker we can figure this out, I don't know. I have some hope that maybe we could like design a system that isn't so bad and so frustrating to use. So, like I said, it's my first video. I don't. It may have gone long. I know some of these, shorter is probably better for stuff like this. But let me know what you think. Suggestions, tips, whatever. I'm gonna try to get iteratively better at this. Subscribe, share, etc., etc. And I'll see you next time.